Hello. You may have heard the term genre applied to different kinds of fictional literature, but did you know that the term genre can also refer to different kinds of academic writing? In this video, we'll talk about that and how that might help us to better understand research writing. So stay tuned. Hello, this is Professor Kent Lee. Today I'm going to talk about genre in academic writing. Now, you probably know the word genre, or some say genre, either way is fine, to refer to different kinds of literature. For example, novels and short stories, novellas, which are sort of mini novels, plays, persuasive essays, satire, different kinds of poetry. Those are literary genres. Now, in the world of writing studies and applied linguistics and education, we also use the term genre to talk about academic writing and different kinds of academic writing. And so I'm going to explain that today, what genre means when it comes to academic writing and how that can help us to better understand research writing and academic writing. It can explain, how we write academic papers, how to understand academic papers and academic writing, and how to better consume and understand research articles. So, some characteristics of genre in general. Genre can be identified by form and structure, theme and subject matter, tone and style, the audience and purpose, and the kind of conventions or standards or things that you would kind of normally expect to see in a particular genre. So when it comes to general literature, form and structure, for example, in poetry, there are certain kinds of meter, rhythm patterns, and such. With novels and short stories, there's often narrative prose structure, characters, plot, settings, and such. Themes and subject matter. For example, in science fiction novels, you expect the story to explore future technologies or societies. And romance novel like Jane Austen explores things like love and relationships and social issues in the background. In terms of tone and style, for example, mystery novels, you expect a suspenseful and mysterious tone and things to be revealed at the end. Comedy, different kinds of comedy writing rely on wit, humor, wordplay, satire, and things like that. Audience and purpose, for example, children's literature targets young children, young readers, in order to entertain and to educate them at the same time. Novels, good novels, like the kind you read in your literature classes, are written to raise interesting issues, often social issues, through really interesting and engaging stories. Academic writing targets scholarly academic audiences in order to inform and analyze something. Conventions. So there's this term conventions we use in writing studies to refer to things that are sort of the accepted standards or norms that have evolved in a particular kind of writing or a particular field. Certain kind of established conventions or standards or norms that have evolved that govern how works in a particular genre are created and how we interpret them. And this can be kinds of common plot devices, types of characters, certain common settings, and narratives. For example, sci-fi novels, science fiction novels, will often have certain kinds of futuristic or high-tech, settings and situations and stories based on that. Detective and crime novels often have kind of mysterious plots where, again, certain key things are not revealed into the very end. So those are some of the features of literary genres. Now let's talk about writing genres. With academic writing, like research papers, there's a certain form and structure. With more science-oriented papers, science and engineering, and some social sciences like psychology, for example, the research is done in a very scientific way, following scientific procedures and scientific method. So the structure of the overall paper is often very rigid. There are certain things you expect to see, And I'm going to say more about that in a few minutes. But there are certain things that you see in just about every paper within those particular areas that you kind of have to follow for a research paper. On the other hand, in humanities research writing, if you're, say, writing a research paper in a literature course, the research essay is a lot more free form. It really depends on what you're writing about. It's kind of up to you. It's a much looser structure compared to science papers. Themes and subject matter. Well, research papers in academia are very specialized. Papers are on a very specific topic. This is not like, a very general first-year college essay where you write a very general paper about some hot social issue. They're very specialized topics. A research essay has a very specialized topic, and it's expected that you will cover it in a lot of depth, and you only cover what you can do in depth in one single paper. So in turn, there are, in different fields, different types of research methods and different kinds of data that you deal with in different fields. And so it's expected in a particular field you're going to use a particular type of data and a particular range or set of research methods to analyze that data. Audience and purpose. The author in an academic paper assumes the voice of an objective expert. So the author attempts to come across as an expert, or at least, if you're a college student writing an academic paper, at least you show that you know what you're talking about. You're not just making up stuff, you're not just going in blind, but you show that you have done enough reading and you know what the heck you're talking about, and you have something intelligent to say about the topic. And it's expected that you have an objective voice in writing a paper. There are a few minor exceptions sometimes in humanities papers, but even then the overall tone is objective. The writer is there to inform the reader about something, but also to persuade. There's a persuasive element to academic papers. It's just that it's done through an objective manner. It's not like, this is my view, but this is like an honest investigation of the topic, and this is where the information leads us to the best conclusion. So for example, if you're writing a literature essay, you're perhaps advocating a particular interpretation of a poem or the life of an author, and your point is not to prove yourself right, but just to show that it's a reasonable perspective, that it makes sense and it helps us to understand this piece of literature better. You're persuading the readers that your viewpoint has some merit, it's reasonable, even if they don't agree. In science, for example, you're trying to persuade the readers, hey, this is a cool experiment. Hey, we found something interesting and new. We've proven a hypothesis, or we've disproven something. We've got some cool results from this experiment. So all academic writing is informative, but at the same time in some way persuasive. The intended audience of academic writing is a more specialized academic community or research community. If you're a college student writing a college paper, you're writing to at least your professor, hypothetically other classmates who might hypothetically read it, and so you're addressing an intelligent reader, and thus your paper has to sound intelligent and objective. Conventions or standards. In particular fields, there are certain research methods that are kind of the norm, and certain kinds of data types, and along with that, certain ways of analyzing your data, or developing your ideas, or your arguments, or your viewpoints. Thus the argumentation, that is, providing reasons for a certain viewpoint or interpretation. Rhetorical support. We'll talk about that in a later video. The types of support, types of contents you provide to support the ideas, the main ideas in the body of the paper. And finally, vocabulary and style. More formal, precise vocabulary and more complex style of writing, and we'll talk about that in another video. Finally, there Much academic writing is informed by a particular theoretical viewpoint, or some kind of framework or model. And I'm going to explain more on that in another video. But a lot of academic writing, the perspective is coming from a particular theory or assumptions, a particular framework. Whether it's business or literature studies or engineering or biology or whatever, there are certain theoretical assumptions behind what the writer is doing, and more on that later on. So writing types. So this leads us to specific writing genres, and what I've talked about, for example, describes especially well short research articles, the kinds of short research articles that are published typically in academic research journals. These are the kinds of journals that are read by professors, that contain the current research, the hot new research in the field, and they're written by researchers, professors, PhD students, other researchers for that research community. So many times when you're writing a college paper, at least in your more advanced college courses, and definitely if you're in a master's or PhD program, you're going to be searching online for published research articles, scholarly or scientific research articles by experts in the field. Other kinds of writing in some fields, there are monographs, which is basically an entire book by a researcher or scholar on a very specific research topic, which presents the writer's own kind of ideas and original research format, but not in the form of a short research article, but in the form of an entire book. There are conference papers where researchers present maybe their initial results or ideas at an academic conference. If you're a college student, I would suggest that you not use that, because you're probably not expert enough in the field to really judge whether that's a good research or not, whether it's a good source. And oftentimes it may not be a good source because it's often very preliminary research. Same thing is true for master's thesis. That's somebody's first attempt at doing original academic research. If you're a college student, if you're writing a college paper, if you're a master's student, you generally, even if you're a full-time researcher as a professor, you wouldn't cite master's theses. Avoid citing master's theses for your college papers. Avoid citing a PhD thesis or PhD dissertation, because if you cite that, you're claiming you read and understood enough of some massive, huge, long dissertation and that you understood it, which if you're a college student is not likely. So only cite those if you're actually able to read and understand those things. Finally, there are textbooks, which is kind of an academic genre, not one that you would cite for your college papers. It's not original or new information. It's just a kind of the whole body of information in a particular field. It's usually old information. It's not research. It's not hot or new or terribly interesting. So it is a kind of academic genre. It's just not one that you're going to cite. If something is written as a college textbook, it's not something you're going to cite when you're writing a college paper. So now let's talk about paper structure. Let's first talk about the structure of more formal scientific papers. In science and also psychology, sociology, where one does empirical research. That is, they create their own data through experiments, formal studies, scientific studies. What you usually see is an abstract, which is like a summary of the entire paper, and then the introduction, of course, which introduces a very specific topic. It's a very specific introduction. The literature review section follows the introduction. Now, in this case, by literature, I'm not talking about fiction or drama or what you do in a literature class, but I mean literature in the sense of published research, published research articles, maybe monographs, and other research that's been published. Literature in a general sense, not in the sense of fictional literature, but in the sense of research writing, published research writing. In the Lit Review section, the author examines and critiques specific research studies on the same topic, and does this in order to first show what we know about this very specific topic, and two, to maybe critique some of those past studies and to show what needs to be done. It can be identifying gaps in our knowledge, some things that haven't been studied yet. Look at these studies, they've looked at this and this and this, but not this yet, and I'm going to do that here in my paper. Or it could be looking at past research studies and say, okay, these researchers came up with these results, but I disagree with something about the way they did it, so I'm going to do my study better than what they've done. So a lit review presents the main purpose or research question of your paper, and it also provides a rationale or justification for your paper. And if you're an advanced college student that is taking a third or fourth year class, you're writing a college essay, this is a good thing to do, where you identify a very specific topic, and then you find the best research studies. You can't talk about all of them, but the best, most relevant research studies in the past that other scholars have done, and you contrast and compare them, and based on that you discuss, okay, this is what we know so far about this topic, and maybe this is what we don't know, or this is something that needs to be done better in order to provide a rationale for your paper. If you're in graduate school, if you're a master's or PhD student, if you're a professor, you do a lot of this in much more detail in order to provide a rationale, like this is what needs to be done, and my original research study is going to do this. If you're a college student, you don't have to do that so much. You mainly want to do a lit review in order to come to an understanding of this is what we know so far. The lit review often justifies the research question, or presents the research question, or if it's a scientific paper, a specific research hypothesis. This is the hypothesis, and we're going to scientifically test it in order to prove or disprove it. The next, if it's a scientific paper, you're going to have a big section called experiment or study or research methods, which gives a very detailed explanation of the experiment that they did and how they collected the data. It's often very detailed. It has many different subsections. And if you're a college student writing a paper, you can probably just skim through that and get an idea of just basically what kind of research study it was, how they did it. That detailed section is more so for maybe other professors, PhD students who might want to do their own actual studies based on that, what they did. It's more so for those researchers. Then there's results of the study, results of the experiment, and then a general discussion where the researchers discuss their results, compare it to past studies, and justify their results and explain what their results mean and why their results are cool or important, and the conclusion. If you are in other fields, you may not see those sections. You may see elements of those. If you're writing a college paper and you're reading research papers in, say, fields that don't use scientific research studies, or in humanities fields, it's going to be different. You're going to have an abstract, an introduction. There might be some elements of a lit review where the writer talks about past some ideas on the topic, or past research or past studies, and presents a research question, and then gets to kind of the main discussion section where they analyze the data. Those might be easier to read. If you're reading an experimental scientific paper, what you'll mainly need to focus on will be the introduction, the lit review, and then the general discussion section. The experimental section and the statistics you can kind of skim through, skip over, read quickly. The highlights are the intro, the lit review, but especially the intro and the general discussion section. Those are really the most important parts. You should probably read the lit review section too. For humanities papers, you're going to see introduction, probably not a review section specifically, but those elements will be there. It may not be a specific section where the writer specifically critiques past research, but that is going to be there. The researcher is probably going to talk about past research on this topic, and then talk about, say the piece of literature he or she is studying, directly analyze it, and the analysis and the discussion kind of go together. It's maybe one big section. It's kind of the bulk of the paper. The analysis and the discussion of the analysis go together, and then the implications. Business papers, a little bit different. Common type of business paper might be a case study where you examine, say, the case of a particular company or business person. And so you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have maybe more detailed background section. So instead of a lit review, there's going to be more of a background about the company, or a background about the business person, some history there. Then kind of your analysis of what happened to, say, this company. So analysis and discussion, often based on a model or framework. So in humanities paper, the analysis maybe is going to be based on literary theory, analyzing a particular piece of literature based on literary theory. In business, it might be based on a particular model or framework that's used in business analysis, a particular model or framework that people use to analyze, say, companies and why they succeeded or failed. Or it might be simply a comparison of this company and other companies, in this case, in that case. Then at the end of a business study, you're going to have some discussion of, say, the implications. What does this mean? What can we learn from this? Maybe recommendations. What should this company do, or what could they have done better? So implications and recommendations. Those are things that you will look for. Those are the highlights, the most important sections when you are reading research papers that you want to use and cite for your own papers that you're writing, especially in a college course. Those are the key things. The background or lit review, the analysis, the general discussion, those are the key points of those papers that you should focus on, and you should be focusing on really the main points. What's the main point, the research question of this paper? And that is going to be the basis of how you cite the paper. You're going to cite that paper as a source in your own college paper by focusing on, okay, what's the main finding of this paper, the main point, the main argument, the main objective of this paper, and incorporate that into your paper. In my next video, I'm going to talk a bit more about vocabulary and style in academic research writing. And in later videos, I'm going to go more into research methods and how those shape academic writing. And in the last two videos, I'm going to talk about theories and other kinds of key assumptions that also influence research writing that are helpful to understand when you're dealing with research writing. So, hope this helps. I'll see you in the next video. Good luck. Goodbye.